Victory for the ultimate survivor. Trump triumphs in the US election. The now president-elect confounded the doubters to take every crucial swing state, obliterating Democrat gains from 2020. For MAGA diehards, it was a night to remember.
It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
The Harris victory party turned out to be anything but gloom, settling over supporters as reality dawned and their leader failed to show. But in the end, it was decisive. The result far sooner than expected. The American people had spoken loud and clear. Their message was unmistakable. But what does Trump's victory mean for the US and an increasingly uncertain world? Our correspondents tell the story of the night and look ahead to what might be coming. Also tonight, we hear the hopes of the people who voted to put Trump back into the White House and the fears of those who didn't. At 7, I speak live to Nigel Farage about the man he calls a political ally and a personal friend. What did the new president tell him today? And...
then it's a deal?
Yes.
Back in time, we look at where it all began for the flamboyant rule breaker who took on Washington and won.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Hello, good evening. Donald Trump hailed his historic win in the US elections overnight, a magnificent victory. He confounded the polls, sweeping Democrat Kamala Harris aside to become president for the second time. A remarkable political comeback, one which Trump himself seemed surprised by. Addressing supporters, he promised his leadership would herald the golden age of America. Kamala Harris is yet to speak about the result. Adding to the humiliation of the Democrats, the Republicans look like they may have seized control of the Senate too, which would give the party domination of government. Well, in just a moment, we'll be looking at how Trump won and Harris lost, the voting groups which swung the result in his favour, and what it means for the UK and indeed the rest of the world. But first, with the story of a dramatic night, here's our US correspondent, Dan Rivers.
Last night, even before a single result had been announced, they were jumping for joy. Then, in a packed election party in West Palm Beach, Florida, the most critical swing state of all was called for Trump. Pennsylvania went red.
Now it is possible.
30 minutes later, it was all over. Donald Trump had clinched an historic victory against almost every pollster's predictions.
They came from all corners, union, non-union, African-American, Hispanic-American, Asian-American, Arab-American, Muslim-American. We had everybody, and it was beautiful. It was a historic realignment, uniting citizens of all backgrounds around a common core of common sense.
After the rancor of the campaign, there was a notable shift in tone.
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Donald Trump has pulled off one of the biggest political comebacks in US history. Not since the late 1800s has someone managed to win non-consecutive presidential terms. But after such a divisive campaign, the question is, what's next for America and the world?
For the world, it means peace, and it means coming back to what we had 4 years ago, when it was respectfully, everybody loved America.
Do you think Donald Trump can heal the divide in this country?
100% Donald Trump will unite our country. He is going to heal what happened these last years. We're going to have a unified country. Americans, Americans.
Black and Latino men had backed him in record numbers, a trend underestimated by most experts.
A lot of people were extremely worried for it because they had the PTSD from 2020. But when they saw across the night that things were actually happening, and some states, key states, Georgia and after Pennsylvania especially, were called, all those fears dissipated.
We're going to feel a relief in this country because we're going to be a better country. Now we got Elon Musk involved. This thing's going to take it to the next level.
The man who helped orchestrate this victory offered this explanation as to why he won both the popular vote and key swing states.
It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, green, white, blue or orange, you want safety and security for your family. You want to make sure that you've got more economic prosperity, more economic opportunity for you and your family. So those are things that cut across every racial line, every socioeconomic status, and Donald Trump's got a proven record of fixing those things, and that's what we're going to do.
Actor Jon Voight was one celebrity who'd backed Donald Trump, claiming he was a bulwark against authoritarianism, not an enabler of it.
I think it's a great night for all the world, you know. When I look back at the moments when you guys faced Hitler, you know, you're great, brave people, and stood by, you know, stood against that juggernaut. That was great.
What would you say to people who...
This is another moment in history.
What would you say to people who have concerns about Donald Trump, who are worried about where he'll take the world?
Well, I think that they're ignorant. If they can't see that this man is an answer to many of the problems we face, then they don't know very much.
He fought, he won. Now he will lead again. Trump's new dawn in America is just beginning. But many around the country and the world will wonder if the future is brighter for them. Dan Rivers, ITV News, West Palm Beach.
Well, the Democrats may now be looking at why they and Kamala Harris failed so miserably to engage voters. The ailing Joe Biden may have stayed too long in the race, but voters who backed him last time didn't vote for Harris this time. By any reckoning, it was a pretty disastrous result for the party. Here's our international editor, Emma Murphy, on what went wrong.
The night had begun with joy and promise. In the grounds of the university Kamala Harris joined 42 years ago, inspired by its ethos of achievement. But that joy faded as swing states turned red.
In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump in the lead there now.
As senior Democrats turned up for a party that would never be, their faces gave away their fear. Those who'd pushed for Harris tried to hold out hope, but never even made it to their seats in the VIP area.
You still have hope? Of course. Love and prayer. This must be tighter than you expected.
Not right now, thank you.
And the woman they'd hoped would be president never made it to the stage.
We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight.
But in reality, everyone knew then it was over.
For months now, these people have knocked on doors, written letters and made thousands of phone calls to get the vote out for Kamala Harris. Tonight, it seems that may have been in vain.
Yeah, I thought America was going to pull through, especially Georgia.
It's just overall sad, and a lot of people think that economy will be better under Trump. I don't agree with that either. I honestly just find it devastating.
From the moment Kamala Harris accepted her party's nomination, there had been questions as to how much race and gender would go against her.
I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
But they alone did not cost her and the Democrats the presidency.
It's Joe Biden.
An enfeebled Joe Biden held on long into a campaign when his capacity and record were causing problems.
The total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
With only a short time to campaign, Harris failed to delineate how her presidency would differ from Biden's.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
And as the economy and inflation became an incendiary issue for voters, she once again failed to articulate how she would ease their financial woes.
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. She worked very hard.
Her record on immigration haunted her campaign, so too America's ongoing support for Israel. Harris's campaign failed for many reasons. The Democrats and liberal America now have 4 years to live with the consequences. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Washington.
So emphatic was Trump's victory. He changed the political map of the United States. He turned states from blue to red and secured the votes of a wide range of demographics. Our correspondent Geraint Vincent is here to show us what did change overnight. Geraint.
Mary, America's president is not chosen by popular vote, but by the Electoral College, where each state has a number of votes depending on its population. Last night, Donald Trump was the first to win a majority of them. In this election, there were 7 swing states, so called because they could have been won by either party. Between them, they deliver almost 100 electoral votes. Donald Trump has won 5 of them so far and is on course to win them all. Now, we already have some data which provides some clues as to how exactly he did it. The Latino vote has always been a bedrock of Democrat support. But that's changing. Despite all his anti-immigrant rhetoric, Trump's support among Hispanic voters went up. In 2020, 35% of them backed Trump. This time round, 42%. The change among black voters is less marked, but maybe just as significant. In 2020, Biden was massively ahead with this group. But in 2024, while Harris was still ahead with black voters, Trump was slightly up. That could have been the difference in those key swing states, especially a place like Georgia, where a third of the voters are African American. There was a big change, meanwhile, among young voters. 61% of 18 to 29-year-olds voted Democrat in 2020. That went down to 52% this time. Again, Trump's support went up with this group. And for all the talk about how gender was going to be a big part of this election, well, the data suggests that although the Harris vote held up among black women, white women did not rally around Kamala Harris in the numbers she had hoped. So one of the features of this stunning political comeback is Trump's gathering of support beyond his base, the largely white, middle-aged men who took him to the White House the first time round way back in 2016. Mary.
Geraint, thank you. Well, voters in the swing states backed Trump in huge numbers, despite polls suggesting otherwise. But not everyone welcomes the outcome, and many really fear what may lie ahead, as our correspondent Rachel Younger reports.
In the small town of Etna, there isn't much time to reflect on America's choice for president. There are more immediate concerns in this corner of Pennsylvania, like feeding the 150 families who depend every month on the Bread of Life pension for food.
Okay, let's go shop.
4 more years of Trump might feel cataclysmic to some.
The apple juice?
And Maria certainly has her views.
I see him as a dictator.
But that's not to say she thinks any other pick would be better.
The last 4 years with Biden, it was really hard. And I don't know what Kamala could have done more for us. We'll see what Trump has in store for us, that's all.
You're willing to give him a shot?
Oh, yes.
But if Maria seems unruffled, LaToya, a single mum of 5, is anything but.
Saying that, it was like, oh my goodness, like, not again. Like, not again.
She fears both for her daughters and for what Trump's win says about America.
How is he president once again when he should be behind bars for everything that he has done? But I guess when you have power and money, you get what you want. And he got what he wanted.
But he's also what America wanted, and in some surprising quarters, given Trump's history of racism.
Been a Trump fan since 2020, so.
His victory in Atlanta, Georgia, built on winning over supporters Harris thought were hers, like security guard Peyton.
Kamala, amazing, and she very influential. But I just feel like right now, we need somebody that can form alliances.
But for many Americans, Trump's promise of a brighter economy is what's front and center now.
Homeless people everywhere, and there's too much money, too much funding being funded to other countries, and you know the time is now to just focus on the future, and the future is the kids and the people under us and the jobs.
Fairly or not, this country's been feeling downtrodden, like its best days were behind it. America gambling on Trump to deliver better times ahead. Rachel Younger, ITV News, Pittsburgh.
OK, well, let's get latest reaction from our correspondents who followed the election campaign right through to its dramatic end. And our international editor, Emma Murphy, is in Washington, D.C. We'll talk to her in a minute. But first, let's cross to our US correspondent, Dan Rivers, in West Palm Beach in Florida, where Donald Trump, of course, is staying right now. So, Dan, how did Donald Trump achieve such a comprehensive victory?
Well, I think in essence what he's done is sort of galvanise his base. He's managed to get them out to vote critically, but he's broadened the base as well. As we heard in those reports, he's managed to increase his vote share with young Latino men and with young black men, and managed to get them to turn up to the ballot box as well. I mean, I think his message on the economy, on inflation, has really resonated. And you know, a lot of people we talked to one the other day in North Carolina. He said they don't particularly like Donald Trump's personality, but they were willing to put that aside because ultimately they felt they would be better off under a Donald Trump second term than they would be under a Kamala Harris first term. So I think a lot of people have voted really with their wallet in mind, with the economic hardships that they've gone through. And just a note also in the last hour or so, confirmation that Donald Trump has not only won the popular vote, but he's won all three of the so-called blue states up in the north, turning them red, as well as Georgia and North Carolina. He's flipped the Senate and may well hold on to control in the House of Representatives as well. A quite incredible result.
It is an extraordinary story, isn't it? Dan Rivers in Florida, thank you. Let's go to Emma Murphy now. And I understand, Emma, that Kamala Harris has now conceded. Is that right?
That's right, Mary. She put a phone call in to President Trump just a few minutes ago, and he took that call and accepted her congratulations for his achievement, and also there was a discussion about the need for a smooth transition of power. You can only imagine how difficult that conversation must have been for the Vice President, who might have been hoping that she was the one going to be receiving that call at some point over the next few days. And of course, for the Democrats, this is the most astonishing defeat. They are reeling from what they've lost, and now the investigation into how they got to this point is underway. Of course, one of the big questions will have to be how they so completely misjudged the sense of a large part of this nation. There was always a concern about Kamala Harris as a vice president and then as a presidential candidate, but nobody could have imagined that the defeat would be on this level.
Emma Murphy in Washington, D.C. Thank you. Well, there is plenty more to come on the ITV Evening News, including what's coming next. We take a look at how Trump's second term will impact the rest of the world.
Can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory?
Keir Starmer's first steps in forging that special relationship. But has his cabinet already set him off on the wrong foot? Also tonight, the GP jailed for trying to poison his mother's partner to cut him out of her will. And we will have those stories and much more about the US election, of course, coming up after the break. See you then. Hello again, welcome back. The Prime Minister quickly congratulated Donald Trump after he claimed victory, saying he looked forward to working together in the years ahead. Sir Keir Starmer stressed the importance of the so-called special relationship between our two countries. But the result does present the Prime Minister with a series of problems, not least how members of his own government have described the President-elect in the past. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy once called him a tyrant in a toupee. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan.
The Prime Minister emerged to a changed political world today with a new President-elect across the water and a new Tory leader across the dispatch box.
I come to the leader of the opposition,
Kemi Badenoch repeatedly raised Labour's prickly history with Donald Trump, starting with the Foreign Secretary's insult.
And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf? It doesn't sound like he wants to invite President-elect Trump to Parliament. Will the Prime Minister commit now to continue the negotiations on our free trade agreement with the US, which the Biden administration cancelled?
The Prime Minister preferred to focus on the more recent mending of relations with Team Trump.
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
But there's no escaping how the Foreign Secretary has talked about Donald Trump in the past.
A president who would line up with neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan.
He has also called President Trump a tyrant in a toupee and a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath.
These are storms in a teacup.
But diplomats believe the real problem is Donald Trump's occasional indulgence of Vladimir Putin.
Should we, however, be worried about his attitude towards Ukraine?
Yes, I think we should. Though I don't know which attitude we should take. I mean, the difficulty for Whitehall is the unpredictability of Donald Trump.
The government has engaged on a precautionary charm offensive. Ambassador Karen Pierce ensuring the Prime Minister was amongst the first to call Donald Trump after the attempt on his life. And there is one British politician who seems to have the ear of the President-elect.
He's a very spectacular man, very highly respected, Nigel Farage.
How much help that is to the Prime Minister remains to be seen. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
World leaders are going to be assessing what a second Trump presidency will mean for them, including the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, of course. In his victory speech, Trump pledged he would stop wars and not start one. But there are real questions over what that could mean for NATO and indeed peace talks or peace deals and what they could look like. Our Europe editor James Mates is here. I mean, there's a lot, isn't there? What can we expect?
In short, the unexpected, the unpredictability, as Lord Kerr was just saying there. Nowhere more so than on Ukraine. President Zelensky will be a nervous man tonight. He did very sensibly go and pay homage to Trump a couple of months ago, and he congratulated it today, his decisive leadership, which can bring just peace in Ukraine closer. And interestingly, he didn't say victory. What Trump has said is that he will end the war in 24 hours by pressuring both sides. Now, obviously, that's unrealistic, but not least because President Putin, who has not congratulated Trump today, may not be susceptible to that pressure. But for the whole of Europe, it's going to be very difficult. We know that last time his relationship with NATO allies was difficult, to say the very least. European leaders will meet tomorrow. That was planned anyway, but they will be well aware that whatever else happens, if it's to fill in for what Trump is not going to give Ukraine, or to just pay more for their own defence budgets are going to have to rise, and European finance ministers will know that. In the Middle East, Prime Minister Netanyahu will be delighted to see Trump back. It's hard to see quite that he could be given an even freer hand than he has been by Washington, but there and in the China-Taiwan, in hotspots that we don't even know about yet. I think the watchword is going to be unpredictability, and that could increase the danger of miscalculation.
OK, James Mates, thank you. Now, it is not what Donald Trump could do on the world stage that has raised questions about what's to come. Domestically, he's promised mass deportations to deal with illegal immigrants, and there's also concerns about what the presidency could mean for democracy itself. Here's our correspondent, Robert Moore.
What will Donald Trump's agenda be in his new White House?
If tomorrow all the things were gone.
And after so many incendiary promises, what can he actually achieve? The most important vow to his supporters was repeated at every rally for a year.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
But that will raise huge logistical and legal issues. There are estimated to be over 10 million illegal migrants. And the idea of rounding them up, building internment camps and organizing deportations on this scale would stretch resources and the law to breaking point. Another priority after the inauguration, and much more personal for Trump, will be ordering his Attorney General to dismiss the federal charges against him. That almost certainly means the trial over those illegally retained secret documents will be abandoned.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Similarly, the Washington trial over his role on the January the 6th insurrection will now likely never take place. He has also suggested he will free many of those who were convicted and imprisoned for their role in the storming of the Capitol.
USA! USA!
The act of pardoning those insurrectionists would thrill his core supporters, but would appall those who saw what happened here on January the 6th as the darkest day in modern America. As always, so much is unclear with Trump. Does he really mean that he will give the police a free rein to deal with criminals?
One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. End immediately.
For many in liberal America,
There's no need to feel down.
the biggest concern is whether he will dismantle the foundations of democracy. They point to this comment from the campaign trail.
We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within.
The second Trump term will also have prominent new faces,
For the greatest capitalist
including Elon Musk, who has emerged as a huge ally of the former and future president. So much has changed since he left office. The assassination attempts, and now the greatest comeback in all of American politics, that it's possible the second Trump term may be even less predictable than the first. Robert Moore, ITV News, Washington.
You are watching the ITV Evening News. It's just after 7 o'clock, and here's a reminder of our top story tonight. Donald Trump has hailed his stunning win in the US elections overnight a magnificent victory. He confounded the polls to become president for the second time. He's now taken Michigan, sweeping the blue wall states the Democrats needed for victory. And in the last hour, Kamala Harris has called Donald Trump to concede the election and congratulate him on his victory. A senior aide said the Vice President talked about the need for a peaceful transfer of power ahead of her planned concession speech later today. Well, as world leaders and politicians watched the US election results roll in overnight, there was one British MP who had a ringside seat. Reform leader Nigel Farage was at Trump's Mar-a-Lago watch party, and he joins me now from Florida. Good evening, Mr. Farage. Did you get any sleep last night?
Good evening. Very, very little, but there was a lot to celebrate. It is the most extraordinary political comeback, not just in American history. I can't think of any parallel, and it says a lot about the sheer resilience of the man. Whether you like him or not, he is an extraordinary human being.
Have you spoken to him today? If so, what did he say?
I spoke to him last night. I spoke to him briefly last night, and I mean, the whole thing was extraordinary. I mean, there were, you know, people in the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago whooping it up. And Donald Trump was just cool as a cucumber, just taking it all in. It was quite a remarkable thing to witness.
Honestly speaking, did you really expect this to happen? I know you called it last night, you said it's a dead cert, but things were not certain, were they, in the run-up to the poll?
I felt he'd win, and I felt that for some weeks. And the reason is he was putting together a remarkable coalition. Hispanic voters, people who'd come legally to America, furious that over 10 million people have illegally crossed the Rio Grande during the time of Biden's presidency. The black vote, he has secured more black votes than any Republican has ever managed before. And very interestingly, the young vote, especially young men who are looking for a strong role model and a strong leader. So no, I could see this remarkable coalition coming together, and arguably America is coming together under Donald Trump, not being divided by it.
OK, but what about the relationship that this government, do you think, will have with Mr Trump? I mean, there's been some quite, well, strong criticism of him. David Lammy called him a tyrant in a toupee. He might choose to disagree with that. William Hague, he's a very sober commentator normally. He called him a serious danger. This a couple of days ago. He said, we need him to lose.
Yeah, and, you know, Sadiq Khan, a Labour mayor of London, has had almost a sort of 10-year running feud with Trump. Look, things have been said by British leading Labour politicians in government about him that were pretty horrible. That won't disappear overnight. But the one thing I've learned, knowing Trump over the years, is he does forgive people. You know, he does forgive people. Boris Johnson said some pretty beastly things about him. He was forgiven. Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, a very senior Republican, said some awful things about him, and yet he was forgiven. And the same goes for J.D. Vance. So look, this relationship can be mended, and it must be mended. Our trade relationship with America is vital, and if they're going to start putting tariffs on overseas products, we need a negotiation. We've got to start rolling out the red carpet now to make sure that doesn't happen to us, and I believe that that is achievable. Plus our intelligence sharing, defence, this relationship really, really matters. And I think the Labour government are going to have to work very hard at this.
Sounds like you're making a bit of a pitch for that job, Mr Farage. I mean, I was going to ask you, why do you hang out with him so much? What do you do when you're out there? Why do you keep popping over to Florida?
Well, look, it's a friendship. You know, it's a friendship. Both of us are, I guess, anti-establishment politicians, populists, if that's what you want to call us. We have an enormous amount in common. I've built a friendship with him and his family, and he may not be to everybody's tastes. I get that. He's an out-there New Yorker, but I think his instincts on the big issues and what he did, for example, with the Abraham Accords to try and bring peace to the Middle East, these were amazing achievements, and I think the world needs Donald Trump, and it'll be a safer place with him here.
But seriously, though, you do sound like you're pitching to be the man to, you know, just be emollient in the relationship, a special relationship. Is that what you're going for? And I'm wondering, if that is the case, what do your constituents in Clapton make of that?
No, let's be absolutely clear. I made a decision a few months ago that I would stand for the Westminster Parliament. I've become an MP, and I'm very fortunate to be an MP for Clacton, and I will represent that constituency and do my best for it. That is not going to change. There is no way the Labour government would ever make me the British ambassador in Washington. That was never going to happen. But, you know, there are ways in which I think I could help smooth the relationship between Trump, the people he's going to appoint into senior roles in the administration, most of whom I also know. If I could be helpful as a bridge between the two, I would do it. And it's not because I agree with anything the Labour government stands for. I do it because it's in our national interest.
And if that doesn't happen, if the relationship is not mended, as you describe, do you think we have real reason to fear in this country from President Donald Trump, number 47?
We have real reason to fear that the world is a more dangerous place right now than it's been at any point in my lifetime. Ukraine, the Middle East, the South China Sea, there are so many things happening, and we need the American president to take over the leadership of the free world and to say to these dictators, look, there's someone here now that you need to respect. With Biden, they simply ignored him and walked all over him. OK, Mr Farage, when are you coming home? When can your constituents expect to see you? When's the party going to end, do you think, in other words? Well, I should be back home tomorrow at some point.
All right. Tired, but ecstatic, I dare say. Nigel Farage from Florida, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And our correspondent Robert Moore is in Washington tonight. Robert, I don't know how much of that you could hear, but this is your 6th US election. What are your thoughts on what has happened and maybe even what Mr Farage just said?
Well, I think to see this as a kind of election victory kind of understates on the Richter scale of where we are on political earthquakes. This was like a realignment. It's not just that Trump won the White House, but Republicans won control of the Senate. Probably they'll win control of the House. Of course, the Conservatives have here a majority on the Supreme Court. And I'm also struck just by the anguish and the humiliation of what's going to unfold over the next 75 days as Democrats prepare to hand over power to someone they have described as a petty dictator and a fascist. And all of this is going to consume the Democrats in terrible kind of recriminations. Some are pointing the finger at Harris, but plenty of others are pointing the finger at Joe Biden's decision to try and seek a second term in the first place, blaming that for the political maelstrom of the last 12 hours here.
Robert Moore in Washington, thank you. And do keep an eye out for today's episode of Talking Politics USA. Tom Bradby and our team of experts digest the results and they discuss where America is going from here. You can watch that tonight on ITVX and YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Well, let's move on to some news here now. The father of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif has denied beating her, blaming instead his wife for the abuse. Irfan Sharif claimed that everything had happened while he was at work. He, his wife, Bainash Batul, and Sarah's uncle, Faisal Malik, deny murder. Well, Charlie Frost is at the Old Bailey. And Charlie, there was more evidence today heard, which viewers may find upsetting.
Well, yes, during the majority of Irfan Sharif's evidence today, he was read a series of WhatsApp messages between his wife and her sister that were sent over the course of about 2 years. And in those messages, Bainash Batul, Sarah's stepmom, makes repeated claims that Sharif is beating Sarah, writing in one, "He's literally going to break her leg." Asked if that was true, Sharif said no, highlighting how he was at work at the time the messages were sent. Then asked if he ever punched his wife, he said no, it was the other way around. And the jury was shown 2 videos that Sharif had taken on his phone, allegedly filmed as evidence of her abusive behaviour. In one clip from 2016, Batul could be heard saying, "Shut the phone now, why are you recording?" To which Sharif replies, "You are pushing me, you are abusing me, get off me, you are hitting me." Well, in the days after Sarah was found dead in her bed at her home in Woking last year, Sharif called police from Pakistan and said he killed his daughter. And today, as that 999 call was replayed in court, Sharif broke down, telling jurors he cursed himself for abandoning the 10-year-old's body. Then asked if he was responsible for Sarah's death, Sharif said, "No, sir," adding he only made those apparent confessions to protect his family. Well, Irfan Sharif, Bainash Batul and Sarah's uncle Faisal Malik all deny murder.
Charlie Frost at the Old Bailey, thank you. Let's take a look at some other news now. 3 men have been arrested over a deadly explosion at a house in Newcastle last month. 7-year-old Archie York and 35-year-old Jason Laws died in the blast. Police have arrested 3 men on suspicion of manslaughter and the production of cannabis. They remain in custody. A man who drove to a riot in a pickup truck filled with debris, which was then used to attack police, has been jailed for 2 years and 3 months. 38-year-old Jake Turton was filmed arriving at a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham last August. Manchester City has been ordered to pay the former player Benjamin Mendy around £8.5 million. He took the club to an employment tribunal, claiming they had wrongly stopped his salary after he'd been charged with sex offences in 2021. He was subsequently cleared of all charges. A GP who disguised himself as a nurse in an elaborate plot to murder his mother's partner with poison has been jailed for more than 31 years. Dr. Thomas Kwan, who's from Sunderland, injected Patrick O'Hara with a fake COVID jab. A judge heard he had struck at the heart of public confidence in the NHS. From Newcastle Crown Court, Katie Cole reports.
Is it Dr. Kwan?
The moment Thomas Kwan's elaborate plan to kill came crashing down as he was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder.
You're now under arrest on suspicion of those offences, OK?
The once respected doctor had spent weeks planning to kill his mother's partner and masqueraded as a nurse to carry out the attack. He sent fake letters to Patrick O'Hara, pretending to arrange a home visit for a COVID jab. He was seen leaving a hotel in Newcastle minutes before the attack in January, wearing gloves and a surgical mask. Mr. O'Hara suspected nothing when he let Kwan inside his home for 45 minutes. He'd even taken the blood pressure of his own mother as part of his visit. Fortunately, Mr. O'Hara survived, but spent weeks in hospital with a rare and life-threatening flesh-eating disease.
I am feeling all right, but obviously this year has been horrendous, and I would hope it would never happen to anybody else. But at the moment, I'm still recovering, especially from the post-trauma, and that was really bad. And I'm just seeing a psychologist and everything else to try to get through all this trauma.
Police found a haul of toxic chemicals at Kwan's home, including arsenic and the ingredients to make ricin. The judge said Kwan was a dangerous man who was obsessed by money. He saw Mr. O'Hara as a threat to any future inheritance.
I've no doubt that the reason why you tried to kill Mr. O'Hara was for financial gain. It was an audacious plan to murder a man in plain sight, and you very nearly succeeded in your objective.
While this case may seem like the script of a Hollywood blockbuster, it is real, and the actions of this two-faced doctor have been life-changing for his victim. Katie Cole, ITV News.
Police in Scotland say they've had to deal with significant disorder on bonfire night as officers and firefighters were targeted with bricks and fireworks. Video posted on social media showed burning debris in the streets as police responded to incidents there. It follows the recent introduction of so-called firework control zones in Edinburgh to try to reduce disorder. And at the traditional bonfire night parade in Lewes in East Sussex, 3 people were taken to hospital and 4 arrests were made. Close to 40,000 people showed up to watch the procession of burning torches and effigies there. Still to come before Emmerdale. He has undoubtedly made one of the greatest comebacks in political history. But how did Trump get to where he is today?
And what a surprise. More clouds, high pressure close by will continue to bring a good deal of dry weather over the next few days. For national forecast coming up in a couple of minutes.
But do join me and Alex for that. After the break, we'll see you then. Time for the weather now. Alex is here. Another cloudy day. Nothing going on in the weather, in other words.
Not really. So politics very unpredictable, some might say. Weather very predictable at the moment. It's just not changing. It has been yet again another very gloomy day out there. In fact, we can get a quick check on our satellite and radar. This was the situation at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Most parts of the British Isles under that thick grey cloud has been on the drier side, I have to say, with a few pockets of brightness, particularly out towards the northeast of Scotland there. But as we head through the next few days with high pressure very much staying in control, there won't be a great deal of change to come. You can see weather fronts attempting to push in off the Atlantic there, but with high pressure still nearby, that will divert those systems up towards the northwest. So towards the end of the week, creeping into next week, you may get a bit of rain up across the far northwest, but elsewhere, high pressure remains in control. So largely settled conditions as we head through the next several days or so. Right, let's take a look at the forecast in a lot more detail right now.
Today we'll see warmer temperatures moving in from the east, especially around tea time. Heinz Beans sponsors ITV National Weather.
So as we head through the next few days, certainly staying on the quiet side, but where we do get some sunny spells developing, it'll actually feel fairly pleasant and mild for this time of year. Let's take a look at the situation then for this evening and overnight. As you can see, the blanketed cloud cover remains over many parts of the British Isles. That will help lock in those milder temperatures. It's actually the nighttime temperatures that have been on the milder side in comparison to the daytime temperatures, which have been around average. But as you can see, in towns and cities up and down the country, many parts hold in double digits. Probably some clearer breaks developing up towards the far north and northwest. And as we roll into tomorrow, that really is going to be where we see the best of the brighter conditions that are expected to develop. As you push further south, as you can see, it stays relatively overcast and dull. That system out towards the west, as I say, with that high pressure in control, will get held off certainly. Temperatures tomorrow afternoon peaking at around 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius at a push, as I say, around average, if not just above. So, as I say, a mild feel to things where the sunshine does come out, but perhaps a cooler feel under those cloudy skies as you head further south. Friday, it is really more of the same, perhaps a bit more optimistic. We could see some brighter skies developing yet again across Scotland. That's where the best of the conditions are yet again, but also towards the northwest of England there as well, and perhaps western parts of Wales. Again, temperatures really hovering between 10 to 14 degrees Celsius, so staying relatively mild for this time of year. Perhaps the chance of a chilly night to come, though, Thursday into Friday, and no great changes in the days ahead.
Heinz Beans sponsors ITV National Weather.
So that's the way it is looking this evening. Don't have a great deal of brightness to forecast, but as I say, at least it's staying on the dry side, Mary.
All right, we'll take that. Thank you, Alex. And finally tonight, Donald Trump's victory may well have been the greatest political comeback in US history, but it is also just another chapter in an extraordinary and, some might say, controversial life story. His flamboyant style helped him stand out in the business world, and it was just a short step from there to the world of showbiz, and then, of course, as we now know, running for president. Well, whether you like him or hate him, he is difficult to ignore, and we're certainly going to be hearing even more from him over the next 4 years. Sam Holder looks at Trump's remarkable rise to power.
He's still here.
He's a man who likes to be seen and be seen winning.
Hey, look at this! Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
From guest wrestling appearances to cameos in blockbusters.
Down the hall and to the left.
And Donald Trump will draw the away team.
Even the 1992 League Cup draw with Jimmy Greaves.
Then it's a deal?
Yes. Donald Trump has ensured for decades he's remained in the spotlight. A carefully cultivated image as a ruthless self-made businessman. But with the 45th and 47th president, it can be hard to separate fact from fiction. His father Fred was a successful real estate mogul. Legend, fueled by Donald Trump, was that all he received was $1 million loan to help him start out. But some claim over the years it was more like $400 million. The president-elect negotiated impressive deals on large-scale projects, getting generous tax breaks. His reputation grew, and so did his risk-taking. He built the world's biggest casino, but that in itself was a gamble. It went bankrupt, as did 5 of his other businesses. His various ventures, including his golf courses in Scotland, have been involved in more than 4,000 legal cases.
Thanks.
At least 25 women have accused him of sexual assault or harassment.
Who will succeed?
But his role on The Apprentice meant, whatever the reality, his reputation as the embodiment of the American dream lived on.
You're fired. You're fired.
He even tried to trademark that phrase.
I would run a great country.
The long-running saga for decades was whether he'd run as president.
Would you ever?
Probably not. You have the Democrats that are too far left. You have the Republicans that are too far right. And I think I'm somewhere right down the middle. They can presume whatever they want. I have no intention of running for president.
A one-time registered Democrat, he even donated to Kamala Harris's campaign for re-election as Attorney General in California. But Trump always believed if he ran, he'd win, because throughout his career, his great success has been making his name a globally recognised brand, seemingly unstoppable and unavoidable, whether in wrestling, business or politics.
Can you believe what we've just seen?
Sam Holder, ITV News.
And that's all for now. Tom will have the latest news live from Washington at 10, but from me and all the evening news team, bye-bye.